So hopefully this is working. I don't know if it is or not. I hope it is. I'm so frustrated with how this is working out. So I've got the camera off and it should just be audio. I am not happy about it, and I will be looking into maybe setting up some kind of thing. God, I wish I could use my brain right now. Cool. Jeez Louise. Just go ahead and delete the dang horror one. The frickin' Sleepy Hollow, because that one just also broke. I'm just so irritated now. Bye-bye, Sleepy Hollow. You were a nice attempt. I'm probably gonna go and delete the YouTube one later. I don't want to bother with it right now. Yeah, I don't understand. 2 days for several days it was fine, and then friggin' started yesterday, it just started getting buggy. Okay. Hey, hope you can hear me. I didn't realize it, but apparently my audio hadn't been on for almost an hour, and nobody said anything. So that's me. That's on me. And oh my god, I didn't realize until I listened to it that the freaking mic adjust sound audio shit made me sound like an absolute. You can hear me and you thought I knew that the audio wasn't working? Oh, I don't. It's fine. Don't sweat it, Z. Did you hear me just now say that I went ahead and deleted the Sleepy Hollow? Because I did. No, I didn't. I didn't know. I didn't know that I was silent for an hour, but still streaming. That was that was fun. I wasted everybody's full hour. You can hear you now. I tuned in briefly earlier while the audio was off. I just assumed you were taking a break. Nope, unfortunately, it was literally just that I didn't even realize that my audio wasn't picking up. I had been reading for the whole time and not even a single word of what I said got picked up. So I'm frustrated, to say the least. I'm not mad at anybody but myself. And it's fine. As it was, Legend of Sleepy Hollow wasn't as scary sounding um, as I had hoped. Thank you for the hug, Mirame. Mirame. Um, I'm gonna run a quick ad real quick. Don't go anywhere, please. No, please, it's okay. Even though the ad is going, so that's good. Preparing 1-minute ad. Wait, you mean it's... God, I feel like such an idiot right now, I do. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, I think, since the video is just not doing me any favors, is I'm just gonna download video and I'm gonna put my Sprite back into work and just do that for now until after all of this is done and I can finally have my old rig and my camera and my mic and have better quality stuff. I really deeply appreciate the fact that everybody busted ass for me. And I don't want to stop content when I can finally, when it finally feels like I got it again. Delete a couple things off of my e-reader really quickly. Shouldn't take me very long. The next choice! What the hell is that? I don't even remember. I'll leave it alone for now. Hang on, I can't read that. It's too tiny on my side. Give me a second. I don't have the chat window as my focus screen right this moment. Okay, there we go. Hopefully that unlocks that so I can open it. There we go. So what I do is have ad manager set to manual and set to 3 minutes of ads every hour, so no pre-roll ads. The pre-roll ads is when people come in, right? That's if I'm remembering correctly. I should probably do that. I'll do that later. Okay. Alrighty. So it wasn't what I thought it was that I deleted. Oh well, that's fine. Scrolly, scrolly. Thank you, thank you. I need to change the title really quick. I already changed. Can send you a TikTok that explains it better later on Discord. Yes, that would be helpful, Z. Yeah, ready? String of pearls. Barber of Fleet Street. And the author's name is Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? James Malcolm Reimer. Reimer. I'm already mad that all of this has been taking way longer than I would like, and that we've lost a few watchers because of this crappy shit. Anyway, I gotta go to bed, gotta be up early tomorrow. Good night. Sorry I can't stay. You're okay, Z. Don't worry about it. Thank you for being here. And thank you to anybody else who has maybe popped in again and again and again after all this crap. I do really apologize for all of the technical difficulties tonight and yesterday. I ended up just ditching the last story we just read, which was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which wasn't even that scary. And like probably 2 hours of The Wizard of Oz, which I might now back burner for a while because I'm so frustrated that I'm going to have to literally reread the entire like couple first chapters. So it is what it is. We're going to continue on. Technology so finicky. You are correct, Hermé. Okay. No, I don't want it that low. Come on. There we go. The String of Pearls, or The Barber of Fleet Street. A Domestic Romance. Written by wow. Where did the written by page go? Written by James Malcolm Reimer. Preface. The romance of The String of Pearls having excited in the literary world an almost unprecedented interest, it behooves the author to say a few words to the readers upon the completion of his labours. In answer to the many inquiries that have been from time to time made regarding the fact of whether there ever was such a person as Sweeney Todd in existence, we can unhesitatingly say that there certainly was such a man, and the record of his crimes is still to be found in the chronicles of criminality of the country. The house in Fleet Street, which was the scene of Todd's crimes, is no more. A fire, which destroyed some half-dozen buildings on that side of the way, involved Todd's in destruction. But the secret passage, although no doubt partially blocked up with the rebuilding of the St. Dunstan's Church, connecting the vaults of that edifice with the cellars of what was Todd's house in Fleet Street, still remain. From the great patronage which this work has received from the reading public, the author has to express his deep and earnest thanks, and he begs to state that if anything more than another could stimulate him to renewed exertion to please his numerous patrons, it is their kind and liberal appreciation of his past labours. London, 1850. Chapter 1. The Strange Customer at Sweeney Todd's. Before Fleet Street had reached its present importance, and when George III was young, the two figures who used to strike the chimes at old Dunstan Church were in all their glory, being a great impediment to errand boys on their progress, and a matter of gaping curiosity to country people. There stood close to the sacred edifice a small barber's shop, which was kept by a man of the name of Sweeney Todd. How it was that he came by the name of Sweeney, as a Christian appellation, we are at a loss to conceive, but such was his name, as might be seen in extremely corpulent yellow letters over his shop window, by any who choose there to look for it. Barbers by that time in Fleet Street had not become fashionable, and no more dreamt of calling themselves artists than of taking the Tower by storm. Moreover, they were not, as they are now, constantly slaughtering fine fat bears, and yet somehow people had their hair on their heads just the same as they have at present, without the aid of that unctuous auxiliary. Moreover, Sweeney Todd, in common with those really primitive sort of times, did not think it at all necessary to have any waxen effigies of humanity in his window. There was no languishing young lady looking over the left shoulder in order that a profusion of auburn tresses might repose upon her lily neck, and great conquerors and great statesmen were not then, as they are now, held up to public ridicule with dabs of rouge upon their cheeks, quantity of gunpowder scattered in for beard, and some bristles sticking on end for eyebrows. No, Sweeney Todd was a barber of the old school, and he never thought of glorifying himself on account of any extraneous circumstance. If he had lived in Henry the Eighth's palace, it would be all the same as Henry the Eighth's dog kennel, and he would scarcely have believed human nature to be so green as to pay an extra 6 pence to be shaven and shorn in any particular locality. A long pole painted white, with a red stripe curling spirally round it, projected into the street from his doorway, and on one of the panes of glass in his window was presented the following couplet: "Easy shaving for a penny, as good as you will find any." We do not put these lines forth as a specimen of the poetry of the age. They may have been the production of some young Templar, but if they were a little wanting in poetic fire, that was amply made up by the clear and precise manner in which they set forth what they intended. The barber himself was a long, low-jointed, ill-put-together sort of fellow, with an immense mouth, and such huge hands and feet that he was in his way quite a natural curiosity. And what was more wonderful, considering his trade, there never was seen such a head of hair as Sweeney Todd's. We know not what to compare it to. Probably it came nearest to what one might suppose to be the appearance of a thick-set hedge, in which a quantity of small wire had gotten entangled. In truth, it was a most terrific head of hair, and as Sweeney Todd kept all his combs in it, some people said his scissors likewise, when he put his head out of the shop door to see what sort of weather it was, he might have been mistaken for an Indian warrior with a very remarkable headdress. He had a short, disagreeable kind of unmirthful laugh, which came in at all sorts of odd times when nobody else saw anything to laugh at all, and which sometimes made people start again, especially when they were being shaved, and Sweeney Todd would stop short in that operation to indulge in one of those cachinnatory effusions. It was evident that the remembrance of some very strange and out-of-the-way joke must occasionally flit across him, and then he gave his hyena-like laugh, but it was so short, so sudden, striking upon the ear for a moment, and then gone, that people have been known to look up to the ceiling, and on the floor, and all around them, to know from whence it had come, scarcely supposing it possible that it proceeded from mortal lips. Mr. Tod squinted a little to add to his charms. And so we think that by this time the reader may in their mind's eye see the individual whom we wish to present to them. Some thought him a careless enough, harmless fellow, with not much sense in him, and at times they almost considered that he was a little cracked. But there were others who shook their heads when they spoke of him, and while they could say nothing to his prejudice except that they certainly considered he was odd, yet when they came to consider what a great crime and misdemeanor it really is in this world to be odd, we shall not be surprised at the ill odour in which Sweeney Todd was held. But for all that he did a most thriving business, and considered by his neighbours to be a very well-to-do sort of man, and decidedly, in city phraseology, warm. It was so handy for the young students in the Temple to pop over to Sweeney Todd's to get their chins new rasped, so that from morning to night he drove a good business, and was evidently a thriving man. There was only one thing that seemed in any way to detract from the great prudence of Sweeney Todd's character, and that was that he rented a large house, of which he occupied nothing but the shop and parlour, leaving the upper part entirely useless, and obstinately refusing to let it on any terms whatever. Such was the state of things A.D. 1785 as regarded Sweeney Todd. That the day is drawing to a close, and a small drizzling kind of rain is falling, so that there are not many passengers in the streets, and Sweeney Todd is sitting in his shop looking keenly in the face of a boy who stands in an attitude of trembling subjection before him. "You will remember," said Sweeney Todd, and he gave his countenance a most horrible twist as he spoke, "you will remember, Thomas Ragg, that you are now my apprentice, that you have of me had board, washing, and lodging, with the exception that you don't sleep here, that you take your meals at home, and that your mother, Mrs. Ragg, does your washing, which she may very well do, being a laundress in the Temple, and making no end of money. As for lodging, you lodge here, you know, very comfortably in the shop all day. Now, are you not a happy dog?" Yes, sir," said the boy timidly. "You will acquire a first-rate profession, quite as good as the law, which your mother tells me she would have put you to, only that a little weakness of the head-piece unqualified you. And now, Tobias, listen to me, and treasure up every word I say." "Yes, sir." "I'll cut your throat from ear to ear if you repeat one word of what passes in this shop, or dare to make any supposition, or draw any conclusion from anything you may see or hear or fancy you see or hear. Now you understand me? I'll cut your throat from ear to ear. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir, I won't say nothin'. I wish, sir, I may be made into veal pies at Lovett's in Bellyard if I as much as says a word." Sweeney Todd rose from his seat, and opening his huge mouth, he looked at the boy for a minute or two in silence, as if he fully intended to swallow him up, but had not quite made up his mind where to begin. "Very good," at length he said. "I am satisfied. I am quite satisfied. And mark me, the shop, and the shop only, is your place." "Yes, sir." "And if any customers gives you a penny, you can keep it, so that if you get enough of them you will become a rich man, only I will take care of them for you, and when I think you want them I will let you have them. Run out now, and see what o'clock by St. Dunstan's." There was a small crowd collecting opposite the church, for the figures were about to strike 6:15, and among that crowd was one man who gazed with as much curiosity as anybody at the exhibition. "Now for it," he said. They're going to begin. Well, that is ingenious. Look at the fellow lifting up his club, and down it comes banging upon the old bell. The 3/4 were struck by the figures, and then the people who had loitered to see it done, many of whom had day by day looked at the same exhibition for years past, walked away, with the exception of the man who seemed so deeply interested. He remained, and crouching at his feet was a noble-looking dog, who looked likewise up at the figures, and who, observing his master's attention to be closely fixed upon them, endeavoured to show as great an appearance of interest as he possibly could. "What do you think of that, Hector?" said the man. The dog gave a short, low whine, and then his master proceeded. "There's a barber shop opposite, so before I go any farther, as I have got to see the ladies, although it's on very melancholy errand, for I have got to tell them that poor Mark Ingestry is no more, and heaven knows what poor Joanna will say. I think I should know her by his description of her, poor fellow. It grieves me to think how he used to talk about her in that long night watches, when all was still, and not a breath of air touched a curl upon his cheek. I could almost think I saw her sometimes, as he used to tell me of her soft beaming eyes, her little gentle pouting lips, and the dimples that played about her mouth. Well, well, it's of no use grieving. He is dead and gone, poor fellow, and the salt water washes over as brave a heart as ever beat. His sweetheart, Joanna, though, shall have the string of pearls for all that, and if she cannot be Mark Ingestry's wife in this world, she shall be rich and happy, poor young thing, while she stays in it. That is to say, as happy as she can be, and she must just look forward to meeting him aloft, where there are no squalls or tempests, and so I'll go and get shaved at once." He crossed the road towards Sweeney Todd's shop, and stepping down the low doorway, he stood face to face with the odd-looking barber. The dog gave a low growl and sniffed the air. "Why, Hector," said his master, "what's the matter? Down, sir, down." "I have a mortal fear of dogs," said Sweeney Todd. "Would you mind him, sir, sitting outside the door and waiting for you, if it's all the same? Only look at him, he's going to fly at me." "Then you are the first person he ever touched without provocation," said the man. "But I suppose he don't like your looks, and I must confess I ain't much surprised at that. I have seen a few rum-looking guys in my time, but hang me if ever I saw such a figurehead as yours. What the devil noise was that?" "It was only me," said Sweeney Todd. "I laughed." "Laughed? Do you call that a laugh? I suppose you caught it off somebody who died of it. If that's your way of laughing, I beg you won't do it any more. Stop the dog! Stop the dog! I can't have dogs running into my back parlour." "Here, Hector, here!" cried his master. "Get out!" Most unwillingly the dog left the shop, and crouched down close to the outer door, which the barber took care to close, muttering something about a draught of air coming in, and then, turning to the apprentice boy, who was screwed up in a corner, he said, "Tobias, my lad, go to the Leadenhall Street and bring a small bag of the thick biscuits from Mr. Peterson's, and say they are for me. Now, sir, I suppose you want to be shaved, and it is well you have come here, for there ain't a shaving shop, although I say it, in the city of London, that ever thinks of polishing anybody off as I do." All right, let's do a break. Hi Raven, how are you? I'm doing okay. I've had a bit of a technologically finicky sort of night. I've been probably reading for 3 hours. It doesn't look like it based on the time of the stream, but like I said, technological flubbery. I'm gonna get some water real quick. Make the break a short one, and so that we can continue back. Bear with me just a moment while I run off to do so. Okay? Don't go anywhere. Oh, hopefully I don't get stuck in my cords. Oof. Ah, dang it. Okay. Making some tea really quickly. Hopefully it'll help a little bit with my throat. Like I said, I didn't really prepare to be reading so long. Now, what kind of timing is that, hey? Alrighty. Got my tea. Just gotta let it steep for a minute. Alrighty. I hope that my reading at standard volume isn't too disruptive as far as bedtime stories are concerned. It is late enough now that this could be considered a bedtime story. I'm just gonna finish this peanut butter really quickly and then I'll pick up where I left off. Okay. That should do it. Whoops. Did I seriously leave my... Oh my god. Hang on a second. Where the hell did I put it? Oh, it's on the floor. My god. Ugh. Alrighty, here we go. Big sip. Okay. Here we go. I tell you what it is, Master Barber. If you come that laugh again, I will get up and go. I don't like it. And there is the end of it. Very good, said Sweeney Todd as he mixed up a lather. Who are you? Where did you come from? And where are you going? That's cool, all that. That's cool at all events. Damn it. What do you mean by putting the brush in my mouth? Now don't laugh. And since you are so fond of asking questions, just answer me one. Oh, yes, of course. What is it, sir? You know a Mr. Oakley, who lives somewhere in London and is a spectacle maker. Yes, to be sure, I do. John Oakley, the spectacle maker, in Fore Street. And he has got a daughter named Joanna, and that the young bloods call the flower of Fore Street. Ah, poor thing. What do they? Now, confound you, what are you laughing at now? What do you mean by it? Didn't you say, ah, poor thing? Just turn your head a little at one side. Well, that will do. You have been to sea, sir? Yes, I have. and have only now lately come up the river from an Indian voyage. Indeed. Where can my strop be? I had it this minute. I must have laid it down somewhere. What an odd thing that I can't see it. It's very extraordinary. What can have become of it? Oh, I recollect. I took it into the parlour. Sit still, sir. I shall not be gone a moment. Sit still, sir, if you please. By the by, you can amuse yourself with couriers here for a moment. Sweeney Todd walked into the back parlour and closed the door. There was a strange sound suddenly. There was a strange sound suddenly, compounded of a rushing noise and then a heavy blow, immediately after which Sweeney Todd emerged from his parlour, and folding his arms, he looked upon the vacant chair where his customer had been seated, but the customer was gone, leaving not the slightest trace of his presence behind except his hat, and that Sweeney Todd immediately seized and thrust into a cupboard that was at one corner of the shop. "What's that?" he said. "What's that? I thought I heard a noise." "If you please, sir, I have forgot the money, and have run all the way back from St. Paul's churchyard." In 2 strides Todd reached him, and clutching him by the arm, he dragged him into the farther corner of the shop. Then he stood opposite to him, glaring him full in the face with such a demoniac expression that the boy was frightfully terrified. "Speak!" cried Todd. "Speak, and speak the truth, or your last hour has come. How long were you peeping through the door before you came in?" "Peeping, sir?" "Yes, peeping. Don't repeat my words, but answer me at once. You will find it better for you in the end." "I wasn't peeping, sir, at all." Sweeney Todd drew a long breath, as he then said, in a strange, shrieking sort of manner, which he intended, no doubt, to be jocose, "Well, well, well! Very well. If you did peep, what then? It's not a matter. I only wanted to know, that's all. It was quite a joke, wasn't it? Funny? Quite funny, though rather odd, eh? Why don't you laugh, you dog? Come now, there's no harm done. Tell me what you thought about it at once, and we will be merry over it, very merry." "I don't know what you mean, sir," said the boy, who was quite as much alarmed at Mr. Todd's mirth as he was at his anger. "I don't know what you mean, sir. I only just come back because I hadn't any money to pay for the biscuits at Peterson's." "I mean nothing at all," said Todd, suddenly turning upon his heel. "What's that scratching at the door?" Tobias opened the shop door, and there stood the dog, who looked wistfully around the place, and then gave a howl which seriously alarmed the barber. "It's the gentleman's dog, sir," said Tobias. "It's the gentleman's dog, sir, that was looking at old St. Dunstan's clock and came in here to be shaved. It's funny, ain't it, sir, that the dog didn't go away right with his master?" "Why don't you laugh if it's funny? Turn out the dog, Tobias. We'll have no dogs here. I hate the sight of them. Turn him out. Turn him out." "I would, sir, in a minute, but I'm afraid he won't let me somehow. Only look, sir, look. See what he's at now. Did you ever see such a violent fellow, sir? Why, he will have down the cupboard door. Stop him! Stop him! The devil is in the animal. Stop him, I say." The dog was certainly getting the door open, when Sweeney Todd rushed forward to stop him, but that he was soon admonished of the danger of doing, for the dog gave him a grip of the leg, which made him give such a howl that he precipitately retreated, and left the animal to do its pleasure. This consisted in forcing open the cupboard door, and seizing upon the hat which Sweeney Todd had thrust therein, and dashing out of the shop with it in triumph. "The devil's in the beast," muttered Todd. "He's off. Tobias, you said you saw the man who owned that fiend of a cur looking at St. Dunstan's church?" "Yes, sir, I did see him there. If you recollect, you sent me to see the time, and the figures were just going to strike 6:15, and before I came away I heard him say that Mark Ingistri was dead, and Joanna should have the string of pearls. Then I came in, and then, if you recollect, sir, he came in, and the odd thing, to me, sir, is that he didn't take his dog with him, because, sir—" "Because what?" shouted Todd. "Because people generally do take their dogs with them, sir. And may I be made into one of Lovett's pies if I don't— Hush! Someone comes. It's old Mr. Grant from the temple. How do you do, Mr. Grant? Glad to see you looking so well, sir. It does one's heart good to see a gentleman of your years looking so fresh and hearty. Sit down, sir. A little this way, if you please. Shaved, I suppose? Yes, Todd, yes. Any news? No, sir, nothing stirring. Everything's very quiet, sir, except the high wind. They say it blew the king's hat off yesterday, sir, and he's borrowed Lord North's. Trade is dull, too, sir. I suppose people don't come out to be cleaned and dressed in a mizzling rain. We haven't had anybody in the shop for an hour and a half. No, sir, said Tobias. Lower, sir, said Tobias. If you forget the seafaring gentleman with the dog, you know, sir. Ah, so I do, said Todd. He went away. I saw him get into some disturbance, I think, just at the corner of the market. I wonder I didn't meet him, sir, said Tobias, for I came that way. Then it's so very odd leaving his dog behind him. Yes, very, said Todd. Will you excuse me a moment, Mr. Grant? Tobias, my lad, I just want you to lend me a hand in the parlour. Tobias followed Todd very unsuspectingly into the parlour, but when they got there and the door was closed, the barber sprang upon him like an enraged tiger, and grappling him by the throat, he gave his head such a succession of knocks against the wainscot that Mr. Grant must have thought some carpenter was at work. Then he tore a handful of his hair out, after which he twisted him round and dealt him such a kick that he was flung sprawling into a corner of the room, and then, without a word, the barber walked out again to his customer, and bolted his parlour door on the outside, leaving Tobias to digest the usage he had received at his leisure, and in the best way he could. When he came back to Mr. Grant, he apologized for keeping him waiting by saying, It became necessary, sir, to teach my new apprentice a little bit of his business. I have him studying it now. There's nothing like teaching young folks at once. Ah, said Mr. Grant with a sigh, I know what it is to let young folks grow wild. For although I have neither chick nor child of my own, I had a sister's son to look to, a handsome, wild, harum-scarum sort of fellow, as like me as one pea is like another. I tried to make him a lawyer, but it wouldn't do, and it's now more than 2 years ago he's left me altogether. And yet there were some good trades about Mark. Mark, sir. Did you say Mark? Yes, that was his name, Mark Ingistry. God knows what's become of him. Oh, said Sweeney Todd. He went on lathering the chin of Mr. Grant. Chapter 2. The Spectacle Maker's Daughter. Joanna, Joanna, my dear, do you know what time it is? Joanna, I say, my dear, are you going to get up? Here's your mother has trotted out to Parson Lupin's, and you know I have got to go to Alderman Judd's house in Cripplegate the first thing, and I haven't had a morsel of breakfast yet. Joanna, my dear, do you hear me? These observations were made by Mr. Oakley, the spectacle maker, at the door of his daughter, Joanna's chamber, on the morning after the events we have just recorded at Sweeney Todd's, and presently a soft, sweet voice answered him, saying, I'm coming, father, I'm coming. In a moment, father, I shall be down. Don't hurry yourself, my darling, I can wait. The little old spectacle maker descended the staircase again, and sat down in the parlour at the back of the shop, where, in a few moments, he was joined by Joanna, his only and his much-loved child. She was indeed a creature of the rarest grace and beauty. Her age was 18, but she looked rather younger, and upon her face she had the sweetness and intelligence of expressions which almost bids defiance to the march of time. Her hair was of a glossy blackness, and what was rare in conjunction with such a feature, her eyes were of a deep and heavenly blue. There was nothing of the commanding or of the severe style of beauty about her, but the expression of her face was all grace and sweetness. It was one of those countenances which one could look at for a long summer's day, as upon the pages of some deeply interesting volume, which furnished the most abundant food for the pleasant and delightful reflection. There was a touch of sadness about her voice which perhaps only tended to make it the more musical, although mournfully so, and which seemed to indicate that at the bottom of her heart there lay some grief which had not yet been spoken, some cherished aspiration of her pure soul which looked hopeless as regards completion, some remembrance of a former joy which had been turned to bitterness and grief. It was the cloud in the sunny sky, the shadow through which there still gleamed bright and beautiful sunshine, but which still proclaimed its presence. "I have kept you waiting, father," she said, as she flung her arms about the old man's neck. "I have kept you waiting." "Never mind, my dear, never mind. Your mother is so taken up with Mr. Lupin that you know, this being Wednesday morning, she is off to his prayer meeting, so I have had no breakfast, and really I think I must discharge them." "Indeed, father. What has he done?" "Nothing at all, and that's the very reason. I had to take down the shutters myself this morning, and what do you think for? He had the coolness to tell me he couldn't take down the shutters this morning or sweep out the shop because his aunt had the toothache." "A poor excuse, father," said Joanna as she bustled about and got the breakfast ready. "A very poor excuse." "Poor indeed. But his mouth is up today. Excuse me. Poor indeed, but his month is up today, and I must get rid of him. But I suppose I shall have no end of bother with your mother, because his aunt belongs to Mr. Lupin's congregation. But as sure as this is the 20th day of August—" "It is the 20th day of August," said Joanna, as she sunk into a chair and burst into tears. "It is, it is! I thought I could have controlled this, but I cannot, father, I cannot. It was that which made me late. I knew mother was out. I knew that I ought to be down attending upon you, and I was praying to heaven for strength to do so, because this was the 20th of August." Joanna spoke these words incoherently and amidst sobs. When she had finished them, she leant her sweet face upon her small hands and wept like a child. The astonishment, not unmingled with positive dismay, of the old spectacle maker. He was vividly depicted on his countenance, and for some minutes he sat perfectly aghast, with his hands resting on his knees and looking in the face of his beautiful child, that is to say, as much as he could see of it between those little taper fingers that were spread upon it, as if he were newly awakened from some dream. "Good God, Joanna!" he said at length. "What is it? My dear child, what has happened? Tell me, my dear, unless you wish to kill me with grief." "You shall know, father," she said. "I did not think to say a word about it, but considered I had strength enough of mind to keep my sorrows in my own breast. But the effort has been too much for me, and I have been compelled to yield. If you had not looked so kindly on me, if I did not know that you loved me as you do, I should easily have kept my secret. But knowing that much, I cannot." All right. Break time. Here we go. Having a little bit of tinnitus tonight. That's fun. I know, right? That was actually part of the reason that I grabbed this. As soon as I saw Barber at Fleet Street, I was like, wait a second. So I'll be interested to see what the differences between them will be. This is what Wikipedia says about it. Sweeney Todd is a fictional character who first appeared as the villain of the Penny Dreadful serial The String of Pearls. The original tale became a feature of 19th century melodrama and London legend. A barber from Fleet Street, Todd murdered his customers with a straight razor and gave the corpses to Mrs. Lovett, his partner in crime, who bakes their flesh into meat pies. The tale has been retold many times in various media. So this is essentially the story that the musical is based on. And yeah, it's definitely got plenty of recaptures or retellings. The earliest one being a 1924 Broadway. I'm assuming that must be the musical when it started was the 1924. That's crazy. Or maybe just a version of 1924. In the original version, he is unmarried. Huh, interesting. Same thing. He doesn't have a child in the original either. Interesting. Had to step away a few times and I'd like to properly hear the full story. That's fair. This one obviously seems to be holding connection a lot better, so once I am done, I will be picking it up. I'm going to put Wizard of Oz on the back burner for a minute since yesterday's recording was bad. And I deleted the Legend of Sleepy Hollow for similar reasons. Anyway, shall we continue? Yes, I think so. My darling, said the old man, you are right there. I do love you. What would the world be to me without you? There was a time 20 years ago when your mother made up much of my happiness, but of late, what with Mr. Lupin, the psalm singing and the tea drinking, I see very little of her, and what little I do see is not very satisfactory. Tell me, my darling, what is it that vexes you, and I'll soon put it to right. I don't belong to the city train bands for nothing. Father, I know that your affection would do all for me that is possible to do, but you cannot recall the dead to life. And if this day passes over and I see him not, nor hear from him, I know that instead of finding a home for me, whom he loved, he has the effort to do so found a grave for himself. He said he would. He said he would. Here she wrung her hands and wept again, and with such bitterness of anguish that the old spectacle maker was at his wit's end and knew not what on earth to do or say. My dear, he cried, who is he? I hope you don't mean Hush, father, hush! I know the name that is hovering on your lips, but something seems even now to whisper to me he is no more. And being so, speak nothing of him, father, but that which is good. You mean in Mark Ingestry? I do. And if he had 1,000 faults, he at least loved me. He loved me truly and most sincerely. My dear, said the old spectacle maker, you know that I wouldn't for all the world say anything to vex you, nor will I. But tell me, what is it that makes this day more than any other so gleamly for you? I will, father, you shall hear. It was on this day 2 years ago that we last met. It was in the Temple garden, and he had just had a stormy interview with his uncle, Mr. Grant. And you will understand, father, that Mark Ingestry was not to blame because, well, my dear, you needn't say anything more upon that point. Girls very seldom admit their lovers are to blame, but there are 2 ways, you know, Joanna, of telling a story. Yes, but father, why should Mr. Grant seek to force him to study of a profession he so much disliked? My dear, one would have thought that if Mark Ingestry really loved you, and found that he might make you his wife, and acquire an honourable substance for you and himself, it seems a very wonderful thing to me that he did not do so. You see, my dear, he should have liked you very well enough to do something else that he did not like. Yes, but father, you know it is hard, when disagreements once arise, for a young, ardent spirit to give in entirely. And so from one word poor Mark in his disputes with his uncle got to another, when perhaps one touch of kindness or conciliation from Mr. Grant would have made him quite pliant in his hands. Yes, that's the way, said Mr. Oakley. There's no end of excuses, but go on, my dear, go on, and tell me exactly how this affair now stands. I will, father. It was this day 2 years ago, then, that we met, and he told me that he and his uncle had at last quarrelled irreconcilably, and that nothing could possibly now patch up the differences between them. We had a long talk. Ah, no doubt of that. And at length he told me that he must go and seek his fortune, that fortune which he hopes to share with me. He said that he had an opportunity of undertaking a voyage to India, and that if he were successful he should have sufficient to return with and commence some pursuit in London more congenial to his thoughts and habits than the law. Ah, well, what next? He told me that he loved me. And you believed him? Father, you would have believed him had you heard him speak. His tones were those of such deep sincerity that no actor who ever charmed an audience with an unreal existence could have reached them. There are times and seasons when we know that we are listening to the majestic voice of truth, and there are tones which sink at once into the heart, carrying with them a conviction of their sincerity, which neither time nor circumstance can alter. And such were the tones in which Mark Ingestry spoke to me. And so you suppose, Joanna, that it is easy for a young man who has not patience nor energy enough to be respectable at home to go abroad and make his fortune. Is idleness so much in request in other countries that it receives such a rich reward, my dear? You judge him harshly, father. You do not know him. Heaven forbid that I should judge anyone harshly, and I will freely admit that you may know more of his real character than I do, who of course has only seen him, let me try that sentence again. Heaven forbid that I should judge anyone harshly, and I will freely admit that you may know more of his real character than I can, who of course have only seen its surface. But go on, my dear, and tell me all. We made an agreement, father, that on that day 2 years he was to come to me or send me some news of his whereabout. If I heard nothing of him, I was to conclude he was no more, and I cannot help so concluding now. But the day is not yet past. I know it has not, and yet I rest upon but a slender hope, Father. Do you believe that dreams ever really shadow forth coming events? I cannot say, my child. I am not disposed to yield credence to any supposed fact because I have not dreamt it. But I must confess to have heard some strange instances where these visions of the night have come strictly true. Heaven knows, but this may be one of them. I had a dream last night. I thought that I was sitting upon the seashore, and that all before me was nothing but a fathomless waste of waters. I heard the roar and the dash of the waves distinctly, and each moment the wind grew more ferocious and fierce, and I saw in the distance a ship. It was battling with the waves, which at one moment lifted it mountains high, and then at another plunged it far down into such an abyss that not a vestige of it could be seen but the topmost spars of the tall mast. And still the storm increased each moment in its fury, and ever and anon there came a strange sullen sound across the waters, and I saw a flash of fire and knew that those in the ill-fated vessel were thus endeavoring to attract attention and some friendly aid. Father, from the first to the last I knew that Mark Angestri was there. My heart told me so. I was certain he was there, and I was helpless, utterly helpless, utterly and entirely unable to lend the slightest aid. I could only gaze upon what was going forward as a silent and terrified spectator of the scene. And at last I heard a cry come over the deep, a strange, loud, wailing cry, which proclaimed to me that the fate of the vessel. I saw its masts shiver for a moment in the blackened air, and then all was still for a few seconds until arose a strange, wild shriek that I knew was the despairing cry of those who sank, never to rise again in that vessel. Oh, that was a frightful sound. It was a sound to linger on the ears and haunt the memory of sleep. It was a sound never to be forgotten when once heard, but such as might again and again be remembered with horror and affright. And all this was in your dream? It was, Father, it was. And you were helpless. I was, utterly and entirely helpless. It was very sad. It was as you shall hear it. The ship went down, and that cry that I had heard was the last despairing one given by those who clung to the wreck with scarce a hope, and yet because it was their only refuge, for where else had they to look for the smallest ray of consolation? Where else, save in the surging waters, were they to turn for safety? Nowhere. All was lost. All was despair. I tried to scream. I tried to cry aloud to heaven to have mercy upon those brave and gallant souls who had trusted their dearest possessions, life itself, to the mercy of the deep. And while I tried so tried to render so inefficient a succor, I saw a small speck in the sea, and my straining eyes perceived that it was a man floating and clinging to a piece of the wreck, and I knew it was Mark Angestri. But, my dear, surely you are not annoyed at a dream. It saddens me. I stretched out my arms to save him. I heard him pronounce my name and call upon me for help. 'Twas all in vain. He battled the waves long as a human nature could battle with them. He could do no more. Then I saw him disappear before my anxious eyes. Don't say you saw him, my dear. Say you fancy you saw him. It was such a fancy as I shall not lose the remembrance of for many days. Well, well, after all, my dear, it is only a dream, and it seems to me without at all adverting to anything that should give you pain as regards Mark and Geoffrey, that you made a very foolish bargain. For only consider how many difficulties might arise in the way of his keeping faith with you. You know I have your happiness so much at heart that if Mark had been a worthy man and an industrious one, I should not have opposed myself to your union. But believe me, my dear Joanna, that a young man with great faculties for spending money, and none whatever for earning any, is just about the worst husband you could choose. And such a man was Mark Ingestre. But come, we will say nothing of this to your mother. Let the secret, if we may call it such, rest with me. And if you can inform me in what capacity and in what vessel he left England, I will not carry my prejudice so far against him as to hesitate about making what inquiry I can concerning his fate. I know nothing more, father. We parted, and never meet again. Well, well, dry your eyes, Joanna, and as I go to Alderman Judd's, I'll think over the matter, which after all may not be so bad as you think. The lad is a good enough looking lad, and has, I believe, a good ability, if he would put it to some useful purpose. But if he goes scampering about the world in an unsettled manner, you are well rid of him. And as for his being dead, you must not conclude that by any means, for somehow or another, like a bad penny, these fellows always come back. There was more consolation in the kindly tone of the spectacle maker than in the words he used. But upon the whole, Joanna was well enough pleased that she had communicated the secret to her father, for now, at all events, she had some one to whom she could mention the name of Mark Ingestre, without the necessity of concealing the sentiment with which she did so. And when her father had gone, she felt that by the mere relation of it to him, some of the terrors of her dream had vanished. She sat for some time in a pleasing reverie, till she was interrupted by Sam, the shop boy, who came into the parlour and said, "Please, Miss Joanna, suppose I was to go down to the docks and try and find out for you Mr. Mark Ingestre. I say, suppose I was to do that. I heard it all, and if I do find him soon, I'll soon settle him." "What do you mean?" "I means that I won't stand it. Didn't I tell you more than 3 weeks ago as you was the object of my infections? Didn't I tell you that when aunt died I should come in for the soap and candle business and make you my missus?" The only reply which Joanna gave to this was to rise and leave the room, for her heart was too full of grief and sad speculations to enable her to do now as she had often been in the habit of doing. That is, laugh at Sam's protestations of affection. So he was left to chew the cud of sweet and bitter fancy by himself. All right. Time for another break. My tea is done now. I'll have a sip, see how it is. Oh, that's actually really nice. Perfect temperature. I was distracted when it happened, but I noticed an ad playing a few minutes ago and it sounded like you were still going when it came back. So just a heads up there. I don't know if it will have messed you up with the recording. Um, I think not. Although I'm annoyed that I didn't get a notification from SiriBot. I wonder if the SiriBot is not in the chat. Come on. That's not what I want. That one. There we go. Nope, it's definitely in the chat. I don't know why it didn't notify that there was an ad coming. Well, that's annoying. I will look into that a little more in a bit. Alrighty. "A thousand damns," he said, when he entered the shop. "I always suspected there was some other fellow, and now I know it. I am ready to gnaw my head off that ever I consented to come here. Confound him! I hope he is at the bottom of the sea, and eat up by this time. Oh, I should like to smash everybody! If I had my way now, I'd just walk into society at large, as they call it, and let it know that 1, 2, 3 slapped in the eye is, and down it would go." Mr. Sam, in his rage, didn't upset a case of spectacles, which went down with a tremendous crash, and which, however good imitation of the manner in which society at large was to be knocked down, was not likely to be at all pleasing to Mr. Oakley. "I've done it now," he said, "but never mind. I'll try the old dodge whenever I break anything. That is, I'll place it in old Oakley's way, and swear he did it. I never knew such an old goose. You may persuade him into anything. The idea now of him pulling down all the shutters this morning because I told him my aunt had the toothache. That was a go, to be sure. But I'll be revenged of that fellow who has took away, I consider, Joanna from me. I'll let him know what a blighted heart he is capable of. He won't live long enough to want a pair of spectacles, I'll be bound, or else my name ain't Sam Bolt." Chapter 3. A Man is Lost. The earliest dawn of morning was glistening upon the masts, the cordage, and the sails of a fleet of vessels lying below Sheerness. The crews were rousing themselves from their night's repose, and to make their appearance on the decks of the vessels from which the night watch had just been relieved. A man of war, which had been the convoy of the fleet of merchantmen through the Channel, fired a gun as the first glimpse of the morning sun fell upon her tapering masts. Then from a battery in the neighbourhood came another booming report, and that was answered by another farther off, and then another, until the whole chain of batteries that girded the coast, for it was a time of war, had proclaimed the dawn of another day. The effect was very fine in the stillness of the early morn of this succession of reports, and as they died away in the distance like mimic thunder, some order was given on board the man of war, and in a moment the masts and cordage seemed perfectly alive with human beings clinging to them in various directions. Then, as if by magic, or as if the ship had been a living thing itself and had possessed wings, which at the mere instigation of a wish could be spread far and wide, there fluttered out such sheets of canvas as was wonderful to see, and as they caught the morning light, and the ship moved from the slight breeze that sprang up from the shore, she looked indeed as if she walked the waters like a thing of life. The various crews of the merchantmen stood upon the decks of their respective vessels, gazing after the ship of war, and as she proceeded upon another mission similar to the one she had just performed in protecting the commerce of the country. As she passed one vessel, which had been in point of fact actually rescued from the enemy, the crew, who had been saved from a foreign prison, cheered lustfully. There wanted but such an impulse as this, and then every merchant vessel that the man of war passed took up the gladsome shout, and the crew of the huge vessel were not slow in their answer, for 3 deafening cheers, such as had frequently struck terror into the hearts of England's enemies, awakened many an echo from the shore. It was a proud and delightful sight, such a sight as none but an Englishman can thoroughly enjoy, to see that vessel so proudly stemming the wastes of water. We say none but an Englishman can enjoy it, because no other nation has ever attempted to achieve a great maritime existence without being most signally deafened. Without most signally, ha! Because no other nation has ever attempted to achieve a great maritime existence without being most signally defeated, and leaving us still, as we shall ever be, masters of the sea. These proceedings were amply sufficient to arouse the crews of all the vessels, and over the taffrail of one in particular, a large-sized merchantman, which had been trading in the Indian seas, 2 men were leaning. One of them was the captain of the vessel, and the other a passenger, who intended leaving that morning. They were engaged in earnest conversation, and the captain, as he shaded his eyes with his hand, and looked along the surface of the river, said, in reply to some observation from his companion, "I'll order my boat the moment Lieutenant Thornhill comes on board. I call him lieutenant, although I have no right to do so, because he has held that rank in the King's service, but when quite a young man was cashiered for fighting a duel with his superior officer." "The service has lost a good officer," said the other. "It has indeed. A braver man never stepped, nor a better officer. But you see they have certain rules in the service, and everything is sacrificed to maintain them. I can't think what keeps him. He went last night and said he would pull up to the Temple stairs, because he wanted to call upon somebody by the waterside, and after that he was going to the city to transact some business of his own, and that would have brought him nearer here, you see. And there are plenty of things coming down the river." "He's coming!" cried the other. "Don't be impatient. You will see him in a few minutes." "What makes you think that?" "Because I see his dog, there, don't you see? Swimming in the water coming towards the ship." "I cannot imagine. I can see the dog, certainly, but I can't see Thornhill. Nor is there any boat at hand. I know not what to make of it. Do you know my mind misgives me that something has happened amiss. The dog seems exhausted. Lend a hand there to Mr. Thornhill's dog, some of you. Why, it's a hat he has in his mouth." The dog made towards the vessel, but without the assistance of the seamen, with the whole of whom he was an immense favourite, he certainly could not have boarded the vessel, and when he reached the deck he sank down upon it in a state of complete exhaustion, with the hat still in his grasp. As the animal lay panting upon the deck, the sailors looked at each other in amazement, and there was but one opinion among them all now, and that was that something very serious had unquestionably happened to Mr. Thornhill. "I dread," said the captain. "An explanation of this occurrence. What on earth can it mean? That Mr. Thornhill's hat, and here is Hector. Give the dog some meat and drink directly. He seems thoroughly exhausted." The dog ate sparingly of some food that was put before him, and then, seizing the hat again in his mouth, he stood by the side of the ship and howled piteously, and then he put down the hat for a moment, and walking up to the captain, he pulled him by the skirt of his coat. "You understand him," said the captain to the passenger. "Something has happened to Thornhill, I'll be bound. And you see the object of the dog is to get me to follow him to see what it is about. You think so? It is a warning if it be such at all, that I should not be inclined to neglect, and if you will follow the dog, I will accompany you. There may be more in it than we thought of, and we ought not to allow Mr. Thornhill to be in want of any assistance that we can render him, when we consider what great assistance he has been to us. Look how anxious the poor beast is." The captain ordered the boat to be launched at once, and manned by 4 stout rowers. He then sprang into it, followed by the passenger, who was a Colonel Jeffrey, of the Indian Army, and the dog immediately followed them, testifying by his manner great pleasure at the expedition they were undertaking, carrying the hat with him, which he evidently showed an immense disinclination to part with. The captain had ordered the boat to proceed up the river towards the Temple stairs, where Hector's master had expressed his intention of proceeding, and, when the faithful animal saw the direction in which they were going, he lay down in the bottom of the boat perfectly satisfied, and gave himself up to that repose of which he was evidently so much in need. It cannot be said that Colonel Jeffrey suspected that anything of the very serious nature had happened. Indeed, their principal anticipation, when they came to talk it over, consisted in the probability that Thornhill had, with an impetuosity of character they knew very well he possessed, interfered to redress what he considered some street grievance, and had got himself into the custody of the civil powers in consequence. "Of course," said the captain, "Master Hector would view that as a finding himself denied access to his master. You see, he has come off to us, which was certainly the most prudent thing he could do, and I could not be at all surprised if he takes us to the door of some watch-house where we shall find our friend snug enough." The tide was running up. The tide was running up, and that Thornhill had not saved the turn of it by dropping down earlier to the vessel was one of the things that surprised the captain. However, they got up quickly, and as at that hour there was not much on the river to impede their progress, and as at that time the Thames was not a thoroughfare for little stinking steamboats, they soon reached the ancient Temple stairs. The dog, who had until then seemed to be asleep, suddenly sprung up, and seizing the hat again in his mouth, rushed again on shore, and was closely followed by the captain and the colonel. He led them through the Temple with great rapidity, pursuing with admirable tact the precise path that his master had taken towards the entrance to the Temple in Fleet Street, opposite Chancery Lane. Darting across the road then, he stopped with a low growl at the shop of Sweeney Todd, a proceeding which very much surprised those following him, and caused them to pause to hold a consultation ere they proceed further. While this was proceeding, Todd suddenly opened the door, and aimed a blow at the dog with an iron bar, but the latter dexterously avoided it, and, but that door was suddenly closed again, he would have made Sweeney Todd regret such an interference. "We must inquire into this," said the captain. "There seems to be mutual ill will between that man and the dog." They both tried to enter the barber's shop, but it was fast on the inside, and after repeated knockings Todd called from within, saying, "I won't open the door while that dog is here. He is mad, or has a spite against me. I don't know, nor care which. It's a fact that's all I'm aware of." I will undertake, said the captain, that the dog shall do you no harm, but open the door, for we must come in, and will. I will take your promise, said Sweeney Todd, but mind you keep it, or I shall protect myself, and take the creature's life, so if you value it, you had better hold it fast. The captain pacified Hector as well as he could, and likewise tied one end of a silk handkerchief round his neck, and held the other firmly in his grasp, after which Todd, who seemed to have some means from within of seeing what was going on, opened the door and admitted his visitors. Well, gentlemen, shaved or cut or dressed, I am at your service. Which shall I begin with? The dog never took his eyes off Todd, but kept up a low growl from the first moment of his entrance. It is rather a remarkable circumstance, said the captain, but this is a very sagacious dog, you see, and he belongs to a friend of ours, who has most unaccountably disappeared. Has he really? Said Todd. Tobias! Tobias! Yes, sir. Run to Mr. Phillips in Catton Street, and get me 6 pennyworth of figs, and don't say that I don't give you the money this time when you go a message. I think I did before, but you swallowed it. When you come back, just please to remember the insight into business I gave you yesterday. Yes, said the boy with a great shudder, for he had horror of Sweeney Todd, as well he might, after the severe discipline he had received at his hands, and away he went. Well, gentlemen, said Todd, what is it you require of me? We want to know if anyone, well, we'll finish that in a second. Thank you, Disturbation, for joining me. Taking a nap after I eat, but I'm still going to support you. I appreciate you. Should you hear this? I need to drink my tea before it goes cold. And it kind of is. So I'm going to jump up and microwave it for 30 seconds and come right back. Oops. Oops again. Ouch. Oh, goodness. Whoops, click the thing. I know all about whoops, clicking a thing. Okay, that's better. All right. I didn't actually set an alarm for the break, so let's see. I think I'll do two more sprints and then we'll braid out. How does that sound? Getting a bit tired for sure. Okay. That was not what I meant to click at all. Okay. Here we go. We want to know if anyone having the appearance of an officer in the Navy came to your house. Yes, a rather good-looking man, weather-beaten, with a bright blue eye, and a rather fair hair. Yes, yes, the same. Oh, to be sure he came here, and I shaved him and polished him off. What do you mean by polished him off? Brushing him up a bit and making him tidy. He said he had got somewhere to go in the city, and asked me the address of a Mr. Oakley, a spectacle maker. I gave it him, and then he went away, but as I was standing at my door about 5 minutes after, it seemed to me, as well as I could see the distance, that he got into some row near the market. Did this dog come with him? A dog came with him, but whether it was that dog I do not know. And that's all you know of him? You never spoke a truer word in your life, said Sweeney Todd, as he diligently stropped a razor upon his great horny hand. This seemed something like a complete fix, and the captain looked at Colonel Jeffrey and the colonel at the captain for some moments in complete silence. Then, at length, the latter said, "It is a very extraordinary thing that the dog should come here if he missed his master somewhere else. I've never heard such a thing." "Nor I either," said Ford. "It is extraordinary. So extraordinary that if I had not seen it I would not have believed. I dare say you will find him in the next watch-house." The dog had watched the countenance of all parties during this brief dialogue, and twice or thrice he had interrupted it by a strange howling cry. "I'll tell you what it is," said the barber, "if that beast stays here I'll be the death of him. I hate dogs, detest them, and I tell you, as I told you before, if you value him at all, keep him away from me." "You say you directed the person you described to us. where to find a spectacle maker named Oakley. We happen to know that he was going in search of such a person, and as he had property of value about him, we will go there and ascertain if he reached his destination. It is in Fore Street, at a little shop with 2 windows. You cannot miss it. The dog, when he saw they were about to leave, grew furious, and it was with the greatest difficulty that they succeeded by main force in getting him out of the shop, and dragging him some short distance with them, but then he contrived to get free of the handkerchief that held him. Darting back, he sat down at Sweeney Todd's door, howling most piteously. They had no resource but to leave him, intending fully to call as they came back from Mr. Oakley's, and, as they looked behind them, they saw that Hector was collecting a crowd round the barber's door. It was a singular thing to see a number of persons surrounding the dog, while he to all appearance appeared to be making efforts to explain something to the assemblage. They walked on until they reached the spectacle maker's house. There they paused, for they all of a sudden recollected that the mission that Mr. Thornhill had to execute there was of a very delicate nature, and one by no means to be lightly executed, or even so much as mentioned, probably, in the hearing of Mr. Oakley himself. "We must not be so hasty," said the Colonel. "But what am I to do? I sail tonight. At least I have to go round to Liverpool with my vessel." "Do not then call at Mr. Oakley's at all at present, but leave me to ascertain the fact quietly and secretly." "My anxiety for Thornhill will scarcely permit me to do so, but I suppose I must, and if you write me a letter to the Royal Oak Hotel at Liverpool, it will be sure to reach me. That is to say, unless you find Mr. Thornhill himself, in which case I need not by any means give you so much trouble. You may depend upon me. My friendship for Thornhill, and gratitude, as you know, for the great service he has rendered to us all, will induce me to do my utmost to discover him, and but that I know he is had his heart upon performing the message he had to deliver accurately and well, I should recommend that we at once go into this house of Mr. Oakley, only that the fear of compromising the young lady who is in this case, and who will have quite enough to bear, poor thing, of her own grief, restrains me." After some conversation of a similar nature, they decided that this should be the plan adopted. They made an unavailing call at the watch-house of the district, being informed there that no such person, nor any one answering the description of Mr. Thornhill, had been engaged in any disturbance, or apprehended by any of the constables, and this only involved the thing in greater mystery than ever. So they went back to try and recover the dog, but that was a matter easier to be desired and determined upon than executed, for threats and persuasions were alike ineffectual. Hector would not stir an inch from the barber's door. There he sat with the hat by his side, a most melancholy and strange-looking spectacle, and a most efficient guard was he for that hat, as it was evident then, and it was evident that and it was evident that while he chose to exhibit the formidable row of teeth he did occasionally, when anybody showed a disposition to touch it, it would remain sacred. Some people too had thrown a few copper coins into the hat, so that Hector, if his mind had been that way inclined, was making a good thing of it. But who shall describe the anger of Sweeney Todd, for he found that he was so likely to be so beleaguered. I think that's what that is. He doubted if, upon the arrival of the first customer to his shop, the dog might dart in and take him by storm. But that apprehension went off at last when a young gallant came from the Temple to have his hair dressed, and the dog allowed him to pass in and out unmolested, without making any attempt to follow him. This was something, at all events. but whether or not it ensured Sweeney Todd's personal safety when he himself should come out was quite another matter. It was an experiment, however, which he must try. It was quite out of the question that he should remain a prisoner much longer in his own place after a time, he thought he might try the experiment, and that it would be best done when there were plenty of people there, because if the dog assaulted him, he would have an excuse for any amount of violence he might think proper to use upon the occasion. It took some time, however, to screw his courage to the sticking place, but at length, muttering deep curses between his clenched teeth, he made his way to the door, and carried in his hand a long knife, which he thought a more efficient weapon against the dog's teeth than the iron bludgeon he had formerly used. "I hope he will attack me," said Todd to himself as he thought. But Tobias, who had come back from the place where they sold the preserved figs, heard him, and after devoutly in his own mind wishing that the dog would actually devour Sweeney, said aloud, "Oh dear sir, you don't wish that, I'm sure." "Who told you what I wished or what I did not? Remember, Tobias, and keep your own counsel, or it will be the worse for you, and your mother too. Remember that." The boy shrunk back. How had Sweeney Todd terrified the boy about his mother? He must have done so, or Tobias would never have shrunk as he did. But that rascally barber, who we begin to suspect of more crimes than fall ordinary to the share of a man, went cautiously out of his shop door. We cannot pretend to account for why it was so, but as faithful recorders of facts we have to state that Hector did not fly at him, but with a melancholy and subdued expression of countenance he looked up in the face of Sweeney Todd. Then he whined piteously, as if he would have said, "Give me my master, and I will forgive you all that you have done. Give me back my beloved master, and you shall see that I am neither revengeful nor ferocious." This kind of expression was as legibly written in the poor creature's countenance as if he had actually been endowed with speech, and uttered the words himself. This was what Sweeney Todd certainly did not expect, and to tell the truth, it staggered and astonished him a little. He would have been glad of an excuse to commit some act of violence, but he had now none, and as he looked in the faces of people who were around, he felt quite convinced that it would not be the most prudent thing in the world to interfere with the dog in any way that savoured of violence. "Where's the dog's master?" said one. "Ah, where is he? Where indeed?" said Todd. "I should not wonder if he had come to some foul end." "But I say, old Soapsuds," cried a boy, "the dog says you did it." There was a general laugh, but the barber was by no means disconcerted, and he shortly replied, "Does he? He is wrong, then." Sweeney Todd had no desire to enter into anything like a controversy with the people, so he turned again, and entered his own shop, in a distant corner which he sat down, and folding his great gaunt-looking arms over his chest, he gave himself up to the thought, and if we may judge from the expression of his countenance, those thoughts were of a pleasant anticipatory character, for now and then he gave such a grim sort of smile as might well have sat upon the features of some ogre. And now we will turn to another scene of a widely different character. Chapter 4. The Pie Shop, Belliard. Hark! 12 o'clock at midday is cheerily proclaimed by St. Dunstan's church, and scarcely have the sounds done echoing throughout the neighbourhood, and scarce has the clock of Lincoln's Inn done chiming in with its announcement of the same hour, when Belliard Temple Bar becomes a scene of commotion. What a scampering of feet is there! What a laughing and talking! What a jostling to be first! and what an immense number of maneuvers are resorted to by some of the throng to distance others. At most from Lincoln's Inn do these persons, young and old, but most certainly a majority of the former, come bustling and striving, although from the neighboring legal establishments likewise there came not a few. The Temple contributes its numbers, and from the more distant Gray's Inn there came a goodly lot. Now, Belliard is almost choked up, and a stranger would wonder what could be the matter, and most probably stand in some doorway until the commotion was over. Is it a fire? Is it a fight? Or anything else sufficiently alarming and extraordinary to excite the junior members of the legal profession to such a species of madness? No, it is none of these things, nor is there a fat cause to be run for, which in the hands of some clever practitioner might become quite a vested interest. No, the entertainment is purely one of a physical character, and all the pacing and racing, all this turmoil and trouble, all this pushing, jostling, laughing, and shouting, is to see who will get first to Lovett's pie shop. Yes, on the left-hand side of Belliard, going down from Carey Street, was at the time we write of one of the most celebrated shops for the sale of veal and pork pies that ever London produced. High and low, rich and poor, resorted to it. Its fame had spread far and wide. It was because the first batch of these pies came up at 12 o'clock that there was such a rush of the legal professions to obtain them. Their fame had spread even to great distances, and many persons carried them to the suburbs of the city as quite a treat to friends and relations there residing. And well did they deserve their reputation, those delicious pies. There was about them a flavour never surpassed and rarely equalled. The paste was of the most delicate construction, and impregnated with the aroma of a delicious gravy that defies description. Then the small portion of meat which they contained were so tender, and the fat and the lean so artistically mixed up, that to eat one of Lovett's pies was such a provocative to eat another. That to eat one of Lovett's pies was to such a provocative to eat another, that many persons who came to lunch stayed to dine, wasting more than an hour, perhaps, of precious time, and endangering, who knows to the contrary, the success of some lawsuit thereby. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and read out. We're just at 2 hours, but altogether 5.5, maybe 6. I'm so tired. Probably should have just given up after a while, but I don't like walking away from things when they're not done. So really quickly, there is the raid call. And let me find someone to raid. I'm sorry again for all of the technical difficulties we had today. It was really a bother. But hopefully I can figure things out over the next couple of days. I think I might take a small break, just because I'm a little exhausted from everything going on. Let's see here. I think it bothered you more than it did me, but good luck with the tech in the future. Thank you, dear. Let me see who's available for rating. Oh, it does look like Falcor's going. She's been going for about an hour. But also ASMR Punk. I think that's who we'll go ahead and raid. He's only been going for a little bit. And he is quite a fantastic ASM artist. Let's see if it'll let us raid him. It might not let us. He is pretty popular. Come on, come on. That's gracious. Okay. Did it work? Maybe not. Hang on. Ah, okay. So it might be that we can't. Well, that's annoying. Let's see. Yeah, I know. A little surprised, but it is what it is. Come on, come on, come on. God, I hate how many freaking pop-ups Twitch has right now. It's making doing this really difficult. Alright, here we go. I want to thank you guys again for coming in and listening at any point in the past 5 or so hours. And I'll see you in a few days. Take care for now.